Great. Hey there, everybody. This is Kelly Filardo from the Grit, Guts, and Courage Show. And in this show, we talk to people about something they've overcome. So, a challenge that they've had to deal with that took grit, guts, and courage. And so today, my guest is Chris Rollins, and I just love him. I met him for the first time last year, and he just has this huge, giant heart with this beautiful story. So, Chris, welcome.
Thanks, Kelly. I'm so happy to be here with you.
I know, I'm excited to have you here too, because you've just got this beautiful story that I believe everybody needs to hear. So, you know what, we're just gonna jump right into it. Share with us your story of grit, guts, and courage.
Sure. Well, I'll take you back to when I was 6 years old, when my dad bought me my first set of golf clubs. As a kid, I grew up idolizing Phil Mickelson, Tiger Woods. I'd watch them playing at the Masters on TV while I practiced. In this chipping area, I set up right there in my living room. My junior year of high school, I actually go to a boarding school for golfers. That is a thing. Even though it meant, leaving my friends, leaving my family, breaking up with my girlfriend, Lindsay, I had to do it. And it all pays off. I get a scholarship to play Division I at Davidson College. And I'm moving in my freshman year, and I meet this guy across the hall. His name is Chase. And Chase and I become best friends. We spending all the time together. And one afternoon, I'm in my room studying. Chase comes in, we start talking, and I notice I just sort of fade out the words that he's saying, and now I'm just watching his lips move. He's got a really good smile. He's got really nice eyes. Shit, he's kind of cute. So later that night, we're pre-gaming with the guys on the hall like we always do. But Chase and I, we're exchanging glances. I even pretend to point at something across the room just to graze his hand. And it's like a jolt of electricity runs through me. Now, the next morning, I wake up and there's Chase in my bed.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, exactly.
What happened, Chris?
Well,
Suspense.
I will save the details for what happened. But that moment, I said to myself, I know I am not gay. That is not me. So Chase leaves. We don't say a word. 2 weeks and maybe 6 shots later, I wake up and there's Chase in my bed again. So that night, I go over to my sink in the dorm and I place my hands on the counter and I physically pull myself into the mirror and I look myself straight in my eyes and I say, "What the heck is wrong with you? You got to man up." But that summer, when I kissed Chase for the first time, I know. So we go back to school things on the down low. Meanwhile, my dad has been calling and calling, and I'm just ignoring him because he only ever wants to talk about 3 things: golf, grades, and girls. And I don't know what I'm going to say, but I know I got to tell him. So I pick a date. 3 weeks from today, he's coming to visit me at a golf tournament in Georgia. I'm going to tell him then. That night at dinner, I am just pushing food around my plate, trying to find the words to share. He's about to sign the dinner check, and I still haven't told him. "Dad, I'm gay, and I'm happy. His name is Chase." And I kid you not, my dad drops the pen that he's using to sign the check. And then he looks at me and he says, "I am so proud of you. That's awesome." And that night, I think to myself, well, that went really, really well. But I know that it might not have. but it did because of my dad, because of how he made me feel safe and seen and accepted. And I just know the way that he showed up in that moment for me, how he handled that one conversation was such a key reason that I was able to later become, SVP of organizational development at a $40 million company with 200 employees by the age of 30. And that's why today I help organizations develop leaders who create the same kind of ripple effects for their people, because everybody deserves to feel safe, seen, and heard. But I tell you, the moments leading up to that conversation with my dad and the decision and the fear that I had wrapped around in that conversation was pretty terrifying.
Yeah, I imagine it could be, right? I mean, I've never had to do that, so I don't know.
Yeah,
Right? But I mean, I've met your dad, so I can see that he made you feel safe and seen and heard, which is just so awesome. But I know that there's other people out there who do what you did and don't feel safe, seen, or heard.
exactly. And I hesitated to share my story for a long time because of that, because I know people who have the same story, the same experience, but they have a lot worse response to it. So, they hear my story and they say, gosh, Chris, you're so lucky. You're so lucky that your dad responded that way. And, I am lucky in that sense. But what I've also realized is that one of the reasons my dad was able to have the loving response that he did was because of the work that was laid down for years before I even had that conversation with him, right? By people I've never met who really have the courage and the grits, the grit to and the guts to do what it took to make that conversation with my dad feel safe. So all the work that was laid down before, I was the recipient of a ripple effect that started long before I came along and is continuing today. That's the real grit, guts, and courage.
Oh, it's a fascinating story, and that was why I wanted to have you on, because there are so many people that just don't have the courage to tell somebody that they're gay, right?
Well, yeah, and it's not a matter, there's no shame in waiting to have that conversation, right? It's such a unique and personal experience for people, and in some cases it's actually a matter of life or death, right? There are some countries in this world where being gay is is a crime that can get you killed. So it is actually a matter of life and death. And so there's a lot of privilege that I certainly have in being able to share that, but the narrative that I carried for so long and the shame that I had around it made it really difficult for me to have that conversation. I was a D1 athlete at a college in the South in the United States, and we are a pretty homogenous white wealthy group of people, and you're talking about a sport that isn't traditionally very diverse or inclusive, and there are exactly 0 people in that sport that are openly gay, so not a lot of representation there.
Right. Okay. So how did you get through it?
Well, it's really about the people that I had along the way to support me. I found networks of people, friends, family, mentors, people who have been through that same experience that I had, but years before. So for me, it was about having a really strong team. And I grew up playing all kinds of sports. I've always had coaches and mentors in my life, and so that was really, I think the biggest thing for me was engaging people who supported and loved me, and finding those who would continue to support me.
Okay. So there's a young man sitting in front of you, and he thinks he might be gay. He's not sure he's gay, but he's in this really high pressure, corporate job, and he's not sure whether he should come out or not. What would you say to him?
Oh man, I mean, I think so much of the fear wrapped around that question is when people don't realize or see what's possible for them on the other side. So I think it's a conversation about what really can be possible for them, And there's a fear of loss, and that keeps people stuck. Loss of maybe friends, maybe loss of people in their family, and all of that stuff is really hard to swallow and acknowledge. And there's so much richness and possibility that you can gain from really honoring who you are. And I think a lot of people that I've spoken to that have been in that situation, maybe it's not immediate, but they're ultimately really happy that they made that decision.
I think one of the hardest things is, how do you break the conversation, or how do you, like, for example, like, I've never had to deal with that, but I remember my daughter when I think she was like 16 at the time, and she was dating a guy, and she wanted to go on the pill, but she found it very hard to tell me.
Mm,
So, but she texted me and she said, "Mom, I know I should be telling you this in person, but I can't find the words. So, but I would like to be prepared. And so I would like to go on the pill," because she was dating this guy, right? And she's
mhm,
under 18. She knew that I didn't really want her to do that. But I mean, at least she found the courage to tell me. And
mm,
then that made the conversation so much easier for us, because then we were able to talk. And I said, "You know what? Thank you for being so brave and honest. I know this must have been really hard for you. Let's talk about it. Let's make this happen for you." And then when we had the actual conversation, it made it easier.
mhm.
So, and I think sometimes people get so hung up that we have to talk in person, but sometimes we need that little icebreaker to make it a little bit easier. So,
Yeah, I mean, so what we're talking about really is safety and feeling safe enough to share something with someone else. And that's a lot of the work that I do, is creating spaces, organizations, teams that are safe enough for people to engage and to share, so that we can build trust. And I talk about safety as an action. It's something that you do. It's something that you do all in. Vulnerability first. And so your daughter in that moment did a really vulnerable thing, and went out on a limb and did the risky thing to text you, even though doing it in person felt even more risky. She did what was necessary to make that happen, and that was a hard thing for her. And luckily, you responded in a way that met her where she was, and built trust. And that's the important loop that we need to create, is when you lead with vulnerability, we want to be responded in a way that affirms that and allows connection and trust to build, which clearly you did in that moment.
yeah, exactly. And I think that's the important part, is helping them to feel that it's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay, to share those things that are really difficult. So, okay, so what would you tell somebody going through what you went through? What would you tell them?
I mean, I think I would say, let me just think about that for a second. I think it's so different depending on the person, but it kind of goes back to what I was saying before, that things get so much better on the other side of whatever the thing that you're afraid of, right? And that that's where all the possibility exists, is sort of outside that zone of comfort that we're just sort of reliable to be operating in,
Yeah.
if we're not really stepping outside of our comfort zones. And so I think it's about really helping them get present to what's possible beyond what they're seeing right now, and making sure that they have a strong support system through that, because it's a lot for any single person to take on.
Right. Yeah, and that's the challenging part, right? It's just finding that peace. And I don't know what I want to say. But it's just finding that gift on the other side too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was really fortunate in the sense that I wasn't bullied, I wasn't made fun of, but there was a lot a lot that I was holding on to, about the personal shame I had around who I was, and the environment that I was in kept giving me hints that I didn't belong there. And so uh, I think what I would say is, by being the person who stands up and speaks out um, and lives fully into their own truth, you
Yeah.
create so many ripple effects for other people for generations to come. And that's kind of what I was sharing earlier, is people for generations before me have done so much work to allow people like me and my partner to feel safe today.
Right.
And think about the responsibility now that I have to make sure that people generations from now also feel safe in whatever context, regardless of who you are, how you identify, where you're from, et cetera.
Right. Okay. So one of the questions I have is because, I don't understand why gay people feel like they have to come out. Can you help me and like relate to that? Like, I don't understand that. Why is that
Well,
so
if you,
important for gay people to have a coming out?
yeah, because the default is that we're straight. Like, that is kind of the default option. And so no one has to come out as straight because it's sort of assumed that you're straight unless indicated otherwise.
Right. Okay. That
And
makes sense. That.
yeah, and I mean, when you look at the reality of how the LGBTQ plus community has been treated in the past and is still currently treated in many, many different ways,
Yeah.
there's a lot of fear that exists in being who you are. So there's a lot of energy and emotion wrapped around one's identity. So it's a big deal when you share that with other people, because you don't know how they're going to respond. You don't know if they're going to receive you. You don't know if they're going to say, well, you don't have a place in our home anymore. So yeah, it's a big deal.
Okay. Interesting. That's so cool. Okay. So Chris, I know you do incredible work. So why don't you share with everybody the work you do and how they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, so my company, Ripple Effect Leadership, is really rooted in the belief that small actions create large ripples, and is inspired by this story and this experience of for being a closeted Division I athlete, and how I can bring that into the business. And so my work is really about developing ripple effect leaders who create more inclusive, high trust, human-centered workforces that move forward faster. And so all of that is the work I do through speaking, coaching, workshops. And you can find all information about that on my website, which is chrisrollins.me, chrisrollins.me, and I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn, all the other places you can find me.
That's fantastic. Okay. So what are some final words of wisdom that you'd love to share with everybody?
Oh gosh, I guess I'm just present to right now is I feel like I've been talking a lot, and I want to acknowledge you for your grit, guts, and courage. And I was so delighted to meet you at the retreat that we were at together, and I just see you and hold you as someone who is blazing trails and is so like unafraid to just get out there and create things. And I love that, and I'm just wanting to acknowledge you for that.
Right. Thank you. I love that. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I loved about when I met you, and is that just how brave and courageous you are, because I know that there is a lot of fear around coming out.
Mm,
And, whether people feel like they're going to be loved or accepted or rejected or all that. And I know in my world, rejection is a huge thing for me also, right? People stare at me and they don't know if they're going to like me or not like me, or, whether they could be scared of me or whatever. And, I know that I've struggled with getting some jobs, you know, because again, people don't know how to take me, right?
mhm.
So rejection is a huge thing, and that's part of why I wanted to do this show, is because we are all loved, we're all needed, and we're all wanted in this world. And so I just love the work you do, and I think it's just so needed in this world.
Well,
So
thank you. Thanks for giving a voice to people to share their stories.
you are very, very welcome. So there you go. That was another episode of the Grit, Guts, and Courage Show. Thank you for joining us, and join us for the next one. And thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Kelly.
You're very welcome.